just in general, but then when he was saying what is a woman, it kind of reminded me of that, because in a similar light, like what being a woman would be different to each woman, what makes them feel like a woman.
Well, since he did ask, we might as well go around the table on this, and I have a ton of questions I still need to I have a dozen questions, but what is a woman?
Oh boy.
He wants to get in, they want to get into it right away.
Wow. So I do believe in God, and I believe that God created man and woman. And I know this is stepping on toes, and just again, everyone has their own opinion. I'm not forcing mine on anyone. This is purely just what I believe.
Does your God think that it's a sin to do OnlyFans?
Are you talking about my God or our God?
Well,
what God do you believe in?
Well, the God that I believe in thinks that that's a sin.
Okay, I agree with that too. I don't think that God's like looking down at me and being like, "Oh, great job, Nala. That's the daddy I created right there."
So you think that the God that you believe in knows that you're sinning and you're just doing it anyway?
Yeah, but isn't that what sinners do?
I guess, but it's not usually what religious people do. Religious people don't usually
claim to be religious.
But what is religious?
Well, I don't understand that.
Well, isn't all sin
religion is different than Christianity. Christianity
that's why I asked
is a
you.
religion,
I asked you what
but
your
having a
God
relationship
was.
with God is different.
Yeah, what's your God though? What's
my God?
Yeah.
The Messiah, the only God.
Yeah, who's that though? What's the nature of this God?
The nature.
Like, is it a Christian God?
Yeah.
It's the Christian God.
It's not like the Buddha God.
So the Christian God has a nature to him, right? And part of the nature is
he created nature.
Yeah, but also has a nature. You don't think so?
I mean, I feel like
I'm confused by the question. He has a nature of what?
Of being God.
Yes,
so if his
but
nature,
I just claimed that he was God.
Yeah, so if his nature
what?
is God, I'm just asking you, you think that the God that you believe in knows that you're sinning, you just do it anyway?
I do, but I feel like everyone's sinning. Are you not a sinner
yourself? Do you know what the Faustian deal is?
The Faustian deal? I don't.
Yeah, Faustian
Educate
bargain.
me.
Yeah. So Faust was a doctor who made a deal with the devil so that he could have more stuff that he wanted. It was all about him and his ego and that type of thing. Literally made.
Would you rather me deny God?
Literally made a deal with a demon. Well, you already are.
That's not true.
That's definitely not true.
It's true.
I mean,
I just proclaimed his name. No, just because of what I do does not mean I deny him as my God.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you believe what you're doing is against him, then in a way.
Hold on. So the original question is, The original question is, what is a woman? She's answered it. What about you?
Oh, okay.
Unless you wanted to add anything, but
Okay, right now.
Okay,
We'll
go ahead.
some later.
A really shitty documentary by Matt Walsh.
Well, okay, but I'm asking the
also want
question:
an
what
answer
is
to
a
it?
woman?
It's kind of like porn. When you look at it, you know what it is, but it's hard to define. So you look at a woman and you're like, yeah, this looks like a woman for the most part. What is a female is obviously like somebody with like XX chromosomes and blah 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 blah.
Okay.
What is a woman is somebody who looks and presents as a woman. And I know a lot of people are like, oh no, it's biology. But let's be honest, no one checked my genitals or my chromosomes before calling me a woman on here. And I didn't check anybody else's chromosomes or genitals before calling them a woman.
So it's how they look like their physical appearance?
How they act.
Their performance, yeah.
Yeah, it's how they perform, basically.
Okay.
I believe a woman is both a biological woman that identifies as a woman and a transgender or a transgender woman that identifies as a woman. And I would like to comment on what you said about God made men and women.
Mm-hmm.
I think I saw a TikTok or some quotes on TikToks a couple of times where it said God created transgenderism for the same reason that he created grapes but not wine. So that the same way that we created grapes
Bible?
but not wine. No.
I was going to say, if we saw it on TikTok, it must be true.
Must be true.
Wait, no,
right?
let her finish her sentence.
Yeah, I'm not even laying down any facts or any biblical
Okay, go
information.
ahead.
But he created grapes, but not wine. He created people that want to create something. So it's so that we as humans can experience the act of creation. Is why transgenderism exists. And it's not a sin, in my opinion.
Can I add something? But would it be a sin if you're kind of changing what God made?
Is it a sin to dye your hair or to get a haircut? Or
in the
I don't
Old
know.
Testament,
I'm literally just
maybe.
saying,
What do you think it is?
Would it if let's say when God created man and woman, would it be against whatever your religion or God to basically say God made me this way and I'm changing what God made?
She's
God
talking about
also
a
made
nature
you
distinction.
Are you religious, by the way?
I am religious.
Are you Muslim?
Yes.
She's talking about a nature distinction. She's saying if you cut your hair, that's not changing your nature.
Is it not? You're
No,
literally
it's not. You're
changing
still
properties of
ontologically-
Yeah,
yourself.
it's not anatomically.
It's not.
I
Okay.
truly-
So
Wait,
do you
guys,
guys
one at a
believe?
time, one at a
Do you guys
time. Go ahead.
believe that what is it? Getting any type of surgery whatsoever, those
that's
people
not
are
like
sinning.
Elective surgery is not changing
it's
your
not
nature.
taking
You are
your
literally
dick off or
you're
taking
literally
your-
increasing your breast size or reducing it or
But you're
changing your
not-
physical appearance.
If we took a cat,
But you're
if
taking
we took a
testosterone,
cat and we
but-
gave a cat breast implants, is it now not a cat?
You're changing its
exactly.
nature. You're
No,
changing
you're
how
not
it-
changing its
No, you're
nature.
not.
It's still a cat.
So you're saying
you're
cats
changing
naturally
its-
have breasts?
Probably
No,
like
what are you talking
You're
about?
saying that
Cats do have breasts.
Guys, one at a time. One at a time, please.
Its appearance.
An important question would be, say you take a cat and then you apply enough surgeries that it has a dog tail, dog ears, and then it starts barking all the time. Are you still going to call it a cat?
Yes.
That's the actual question that we're dealing with.
Yeah, I'd call it a
now,
cat.
some people
That's
would
a
still
cat.
call it a cat, right?
Because that's
I
its
call it a
nature.
mutant.
The issue is that the issue is that
butchered animal.
the issue that we're running to is if you define gender as essentially the performance, right? If you separate gender and sex, although I would argue gender is obviously downstream of sex, but if you treat them as separate words, then the question is, why do we, like, if you're going to say gender and sex are the same thing, why do we have two words?
I mean,
what's the purpose?
can I add something?
Well, let's go around the table to give everybody an opportunity to answer the initial question, what is a woman? And then if you want to add any additional, go ahead.
Oh, I mean, what I was gonna say is, I just feel like with that argument, like obviously not every person is gonna, agree with certain things or understand why people are trans. For me, I feel like the main core thing is if we know that their life expectancies are in their like 26, 27, 28 because of suicide. For me, it's more of like whether or not you understand it. It doesn't hard to respect somebody.
So hold people emotionally hostage.
What part
I mean,
of that is
I-
holding someone?
Well,
think it's
because
really-
if you say, I will remove myself from the equation if you don't do this thing I want, you're holding people emotionally
I
hostage.
mean, also, I feel like if you're not passing and someone accidentally calls you the wrong pronoun, like, yes, you're being like, you shouldn't blow up on people for things like that. But if like if you're vindictively doing it,
Yeah.
that's a different thing.
yeah,
You know
but
what I
isn't
mean?
an emotional hostage taking to say, do this thing or else I'll hurt myself?
No.
I don't think any trans person is saying if you do
Well,
not.
then why would the argument come up then?
No, but
where
see,
she
no,
says
there's
the
hold
reason
on,
we
there are-
ought to do this
there
is
are
because these
absolutely-
people could hurt themselves.
Yeah, there are absolutely transgender people who are saying, if you don't do this, I'm going to kill myself, right? And that's not
Can
the
we
case.
Can't.
avoid?
But here's
can
the
we
thing,
avoid
though.
like
I
say
think-
delete?
I
don't
No,
lie.
no,
we can't say
certain
that.
words,
Can you say
certain words
delete
can't
yourself?
use.
Sorry.
But I also think
That's why I'm
like
careful
if someone, you can not agree or agree with something, but then like if someone came up to you and like said like to, you know, like respect them or whatever, I think that should be respected. But I also think like everyone has their own opinions and you believe in what you believe in. But then if you're like purposely like attacking somebody for what they believe in, then I think that's a little like, okay, like you shouldn't be doing that. But then at the same time, like everyone also believes in what they believe in. But when it comes to like a woman and or when it comes to transgender and like pronouns, like I saw this TikTok where it was like, okay, like if I told you, oh well, I need to be called beautiful and I need to be called smart, and if you don't call me that, then you're basically like, you know, you're wrong. Because it's like, isn't it really the same thing?
Or if they
like,
say that they'll hurt themselves
Yeah.
if you don't. If
What's
you
a
do
cup?
that,
I mean,
Define for me a cup or a sandwich. What's a cup or a sandwich?
a cup.
What is
You-
a sandwich?
Something a woman
sandwich.
makes.
This is the-
That's a joke. Come on.
But that means curry is also
I
a
make some
sandwich.
good sandwiches
So this
though.
is the chair argument,
Joe,
right?
come
It
on.
is the
little
chair
levity,
Yeah,
guys.
so you can never define completely what a chair
No,
is.
actually, that's not what I'm trying to say at all. I'm trying to say that we tend to define things in functional ways. That's the way that we use language, right? So, like, when we go, like, into, like, what's a soup? Is a smoothie a soup? It's in part a stupid fucking question because nobody cares.
Yeah, but-
what we do is we act like smoothies aren't really soup, even though they kind of are in almost every single way, but they're not really, like, nobody treats them like they're soup. So why we don't call smoothies soup. And so this is a way where I'm breaking out to, like, I wouldn't say that a trans person is a female. I wouldn't really be willing to confer those medical terms to them. But when it comes to woman, it's necessarily evolved as a word of functionality. And so it's like, it's really weird if you have Megan Fox, but she has a dick, for me to be like, oh, it's still a man. It's like,
I think that that's less weird. So definitions also have defining ends. They have support for what the definition's supposed to be. So we can look at words and then we can look at the words that support those words. What's the
Like the
word that
etymology.
supports the word
Yeah.
of woman? It's female.
It's not.
It is. It's always
not.
been. When has it never? When has it not been?
Woman.
Just one sec.
So
Just
what
one
is-
sec. Just one sec.
Fuchs' sake, forcing people to participate in others' mental illness
Oh.
wrong and hurts everyone. It is literally an enemy action to encourage someone to live in delusion. Stop the lies, get some help.
I mean,
All right,
I
there you
feel
have it,
like-
Grid One.
like to go back to what we were talking about earlier, I do think the logic of, well, we're all sinners as a reason to sin doesn't really make too much sense, because like to know you're going to continue sinning when you go and you confess or ask for forgiveness. When you're asking for forgiveness, like, is it asking for forgiveness or is it manipulation? If I tell you, I'm sorry, let's say, for a relationship example, I'm sorry I cheated on you, I'm not going to cheat on you again, and then cheat 2 days later. Were you ever truly sorry?
Do you want like the liturgical answer? Like Catholicism, for example, would say, no, you're not actually sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like different religions and different sectors of Christianity might define it differently. But I feel like I grew up, I was like altar serving, waited till marriage in high school. And for me, the moment where I kind of had to step away from it is, if this is true, and if I believe in a Christian God that could literally damn me to eternal fire for this is the most important thing in the world. So it's either I live by it or I don't believe in it at all, because it's kind of odd to believe in something like that and then cherry pick it.
So did you just decide to not live by it?
I mean, I could go into depth of what I believe. I feel like I couldn't trust the same church that was sending out millions of dollars of hush money, touching kids, taking gospels out the Bible. Most Christians don't even know about Mary Magdalene. Like, certain things aren't really talked about, which makes me feel like I don't trust the church as much as I do believe in God, but I wouldn't say I believe in a
this one didn't
Christian
trigger,
God.
but okay, a woman is a biological female who doesn't have the herpes. By that, he always met Jay Butler. He always talks about herpes. By that standard, there isn't any women in that room. Brian said, "Oh my God!" Brian said it best. On a long enough timeline, all porn stars get herpes. Did I say that?
Did you say that?
Did I say that? I might have.
You should yell at your viewers not paying attention. Not everyone here is porn stars.
Mostly all porn stars
Period.
get tested and stuff like that. So
most porn stars are
Most porn panels don't test for herpes.
Yeah, most of them
That
don't
is
test.
true. Then a lot of the they don't test for herpes. So. Or HPV.
Well, the problem is herpes is also like silent most of the time. So like there's one stat that said like 80% of people have like silent herpes. So like probably if this guy's fucked with more than 3 people, there's a good
You might
chance
have
he has
herpes,
it.
my guy.
But I've also heard that study is not being replicated well. So I would take that with like a grain of salt.
All right. Well, he happens to be a urologist.
Isn't herpes also environmental? Can't you get it from your environment?
environmentally?
Like
Like
drinking from a cup.
That's what I'm saying.
But that's
Yeah.
someone with an
What?
active
has
breakout.
anything to do with
This
it.
is also
Are you-
very different of
Are
someone
you
with
talking
an
of
active breakout.
animals? That's a crime. I just want to say.
What?
You're talking about the environment. What are you going out in the forest? What are you doing?
She means like
Forest or
right
cups?
now we could.
Have you been-
Environment doesn't just have to
Have
do
you-
with the forest.
Have you been intimate with a coyote?
No,
Okay,
I
because
don't practice
maybe
bestiality.
that's a reservoir for herpes is the coyote population in California.
Do you know
They've-
much about
I've never even seen a coyote.
They've
in
been hanging
California.
out.
just
There's
so
a lot
many
of
of them.
coyotes in the SFV where
you-
a lot
have
of the
Yeah,
just
could you
prefer
tell us
men.
about
No, they don't have
coyotes,
herpes.
Brian?
coyote.
I know about coyote.
Coyotes
Koalas have
Coyote.
chlamydia.
Well,
Fun fact.
Coyotes.
Yeah, that's a
I'll
thing.
tell you.
That was
okay,
so
let's
random,
move on.
too.
No, talk to us
Here,
about coyote.
going around the table, what is a woman? I think you answered,
I
correct?
answered.
What about you?
I don't really know how to answer that.
It's okay. You can. It's okay. We believe
A
in you.
woman is someone who is feminine,
Oh.
and that doesn't mean that
So
But
there's a trans woman who's like looks like Megan Fox, a woman. If Megan Fox has a dick, is she a
No.
woman? But she looks like a woman, and she's
that's
super
she's
feminine.
not a woman.
Okay, so you don't think women are people who are
well,
feminine?
that's what I was about to say, but I don't think. That's why I don't really
She doesn't
know
want
how
to
to
get
answer
canceled.
that.
She doesn't want to get canceled.
You want XX chromosomes in a vagina,
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
except for hermaphrodites. You're not really sure about that.
Well, I was gonna actually ask if, let's say, like, going back to that, if Megan Fox had a dick, would you allow her to compete in women's sport?
Do you want to open the trans sports conversation because it's super different than
That's
a
very-
yeah,
a definitional
Here, how about we
conversation?
get around the table? We can get to the sports things. We'll get around the table just after this.
Nashunabun donated $200.
Yeah, thank you, man.
I'm sick of the argument that because there are two
Thank you,
separate
Nasha.
words, they must be different. What the diff between glad, happy, good? We all learned a word in elementary to describe this. Oh yeah, synonyms, idiot.
Okay. Huh? That's really stupid. Okay.
What if definition? Jeez, I can't say this word. Can anybody help me?
Definitionally?
Definition. Thank you. English is my second language. So.
That's okay. Coyote's your first, right?
Yes. Wait, Nala, let's hear a little. Okay, never mind.
こんにちは、私の名前はナラです。今日はどう
That's
です
not
か
exactly what I was going for, but I liked it. Thank you.
No, but I thought you were referring to the Japanese like last time. You're like, no, let's
Should be
hear that.
Japanese
Did you think I spoke coyote or some shit? I've
But,
never
but
seen
what
that
Japanese
one.
language.
if
Touch it, touch it,
definitionally a cohort of people think that or believe that the word woman refers to a female, and the word man refers to males.
Yeah. I mean, this is the issue with definition arguments. It's
Right.
like the way that societies come to definitions is super different. This is why when people like, etymologically, it doesn't mean that. Nobody fucking cares, because that's not how we treat words unless they're like clinical medical words. And we got rid of all of these words from being clinical medical for the most part. So if society as a group decides that a woman is a woman with 2 X chromosomes exclusively, then everyone's going to function like that way. The problem is that it's still not very functional in a society if you've got Megan Fox walking around hiding her dick super well, because you're definitely not testing for people's vaginas and X chromosomes when you're just looking around. This is why gender's more of a performance and sex is a medical term.
No, it is actually useful.
That is true.
So here's the truth. The truth is that society didn't have any problems with this. Society's never had any problems with this. Nobody was ever confused about who was a man and who was a woman ever. It never came up. Ever. It never came up. Yeah, it is
There
true.
is so much
Did I
historical
just let you talk
examples,
the
like
whole
Roman
time? I didn't say
Yeah,
anything.
Yeah, let him talk. Let him talk.
So look, we really didn't have this problem. It was not a problem. You go back and read books in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. They're not talking about this. You read books from the 1800s. They don't care. Okay, it was not a problem inside of society. To know who was a female and who was a male, never been a problem. What has happened is special interest groups have moved in to the social sciences and have begun to fund studies and have begun to push an agenda in order to make this definition now get pushed out into the ethos. And like like Not So Erudite just said, right? What happens is in the sociological fields, they've already begun changing all of the definitions there, trying to get it to get changed out into the ethos, into the commons. But you know what? We really shouldn't have done that, and they don't have the authority to make that choice for other people.
So you and I could probably circle jerk about how shit sociology is all day.
Hold on,
Modest
just one second.
Hikima donated $200. Why do trans women mark female on government forms? There was a turning point recently where gender and biology combined again. Stop acting like I need to partake in and confirm people's fetishes, SMH.
Yeah, that's the other thing is autogynephilia and how many of the, M to Fs suffer from autogynephilia.
Yeah.
It is definitely a fetish.
And there's a really big issue when you look at F to Ms as far as like comorbidities of like kind of canary disorders that we would call in the early adolescence, right? So when you list criticisms, I'm not so partisan that I wouldn't just grant you all those criticisms. The issue for me when we're talking about definitions is A, it's a boring conversation to me, and B, the history that you gave isn't quite correct. For example, wifeman etymologically just comes from talking about like the other partner who wasn't the man, like it was just wifeman. These also got lots of cultures, for example, that have something like the fa'afafine. The fa'afafine is a third gender that exists in a Samoan culture. It's existed for a couple of hundred of years. And I would agree if you're like, well, that's a case, different example. The problem is that there is history and dialogue about gender dynamics to some degree. It's just the issue is like they didn't have the language that we have now when they talk about it.
They had the language in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s to say, hey, Bill over there, he's not just wearing a wig. Right? He's a woman. They had the language to do that. Of course they did.
Like they were also very suppressed.
Butler donated $200. Since condoms do not protect from genital herpes and 60 bodies equals exposure to 12 infected partners, I can promise Nala is a threat to every man in this room. Abdul, get the rocks. We found patient 0.
Oh my God.
But my other thing is, if you look at what gender is supposed to represent, it has two ends of an extreme. So the two ends of the extreme have to be male and female, or gender can't actually mean anything. It can't, because a word has to refer to something outside of the word itself. It has to refer to something outside of the word itself, or it's regressive. It's a regressive definition. So if you have male on this side and female on this side, the gender is referring to the biology. It actually has to be referring to the biology.
I've already granted you that gender is downstream in biology, but just because two synonyms overlap, it doesn't make them the same word. This is why the one person that messaged him was like, joy, good, blah, are all the same word. I'm just like, holy shit, I'm really worried about your vocab score. We do have a whole bunch of synonyms, but when you actually look into what the words mean, this is why it's really frustrating when somebody says like maybe joy and happiness. They're synonyms, they're kind of similar, and they overlap a ton, and maybe the beginning and ends of joy are all encapsulated within happiness. But most people treat joy like a separate word than happiness. This is how we engage with these words.
Okay, so let's just grant that this is true. Sure. Okay. Let's say if I look at a trans woman and say, that's a guy with a wig, and you say, No, it's not. Right?
Super depend to me.
Right. How am I wrong?
I guess it would depend. Is the person passing?
Let's just say that they are, but I know.
Like it's Megan Fox?
Yeah, let's just say that I know. Why am I still wrong, though, to say that? Why would that be wrong?
I would say you're being insensitive.
Yeah, right, but it's not wrong.
I would disagree with you. I'd say that she's a woman, but at the end of the day, I recognize that you probably won't be defining women the way that I am.
Right. So when
which
we're
is
talking,
why this conversation is
so when we're talking about definitions here, right, then definitionally, if I say that, I'm not wrong. Now, if I'm moving back towards you, I think that I have a better case to make for why you are. Because I think that when we're talking about biology, right, of male and female, that what I'm saying is far more accurate than what you're saying.
I would actually say the opposite. I would say something like sex is going to be deeply less functional and less accurate because there's, as you probably know, all of those extreme outliers that don't fall well into the sex categories. This is why sex is a bimodal function. Gender, I think, actually works really well because it explains the function and how we interact with each other. If I see somebody walk around with hairy legs, clearly a dick under the dress, and like a beard growing, I'm going to agree with you being like, I probably would respect and be like, I understand what they're trying to perform towards, but I would agree with you that you might label them a man.
I don't understand the sex is a bimodal function. How that even if that's true, how would that even play in here?
The reason why it would play in is because you're saying sex is a more accurate word. And I'm saying the problem with all of these words is that none of them are hyper accurate. When you talk about a hermaphrodite or people that are born with the XY chromosomes but their testes don't drop, they're born with vaginas, they look like women in every single way, but they're functionally men because we don't interact with each other.
They're pretty accurate.
That's
they're
the thing.
pretty accurate. Like, for instance, it's so accurate, in fact, that any farm animal that's born, you can essentially just take one peek and you know. Same thing with human children.
Actually, not true of cats. But
Same thing with human children.
After Andrew, go ahead, Pixie, and then if you want to
the problem is that your definition is not actually reflecting how you're using it in reality. You didn't check anybody's genitals in here. You didn't check their chromosomes. You're making assumptions on their appearance.
Because we have to make assumptions in order to use words.
Exactly.
What does that have to do with anything?
Exactly.
Just 1 second, then we'll come back in.
That's not a reflection to reality,
Will a straight
though.
man never be attracted to a trans woman? Probably not. But I guess you never know.
I mean, why do they make so much money in porn? That's the thing. No man is
Our
attracted.
words have to reflect reality, otherwise
One at
they're
a time, one at a
meaningless.
time.
And the way
Guys, wait,
at a
hold
time,
on.
guys.
Hold on, guys. Just one at a time, really quick. Thank you, St. Reezy. I have a question related to that I'll get into in just a sec. Let me do one chat before it falls off, and then I'll have you come in, Pixie. We had Big Papa Karma. Brian, I'm back with a link because it's a sin to lie. This is a public on YouTube, so it's a completely fair game. So let's be men and see who's a liar. Unfortunately, my friend, you sent me a video that's an hour and 30 minutes long that's called Occult Roots of Feminism with Based Homeschool Mom, aka Rachel Wilson. Unfortunately, my dear friend, I'm not going to be able to play this hour and 30 minute long video, but I mentioned the title. So go ahead, Pixie, go ahead.
So the point is, our words have to reflect how we actually use them in reality. Otherwise, they're meaningless. Otherwise, I can call, you a chair or something like that, right? They have to have some reflection on our day-to-day usage. So you can say like, oh no, like technically, like, appearance, it doesn't really matter, but it does matter because that is how we use the word. Functional definitions is what matters, a function of how we use the word.
So let's assume that we grant this for a second. Let me ask you a question. Is a male who identifies himself as a woman who doesn't meet any of the criteria for what you would consider presentation, even though they're trying really hard, is that still a woman?
I would say societally they fail to present as a woman.
Okay, but would you still call them one?
Personally, I would be respectful towards them, but I would say you're not presenting properly
wait, why
as
would you
a
do
woman.
that? It doesn't match up with the reality.
What? Because you can be respectful towards someone, right? But still be like, hey, just telling you like there is a non-consensual or not. You're not meeting the basis for a reality requirement.
So what you're showing me here essentially is that you will use the word that doesn't meet up with the expectation of reality in order to not be a little bit overtly sensitive towards that person. Right. However, if I'm using the word which is more descriptive towards that reality, what am I doing wrong?
I have a question.
No, answer mine and then ask yours.
No, I'm going to answer yours through this, basically.
You're going to answer mine by asking me a question.
You'll see in a second.
You're going to answer my question by asking me a
question.
No,
you'll see. Just be patient.
Mm-hmm.
You have called me Pixie, right? But that is not my governmental or my real name, right? That is my streaming name. Yet you still call me by that name, right? So even though that name isn't what is happening in reality, you still refer me to as such.
His pseudonym seems a bit different to me than... the conversation.
The issue with this is that what we're doing is what often happens.
Wait, did you want to answer Andrew's question?
Well, yeah, the point that I was trying to get to at the basis of this is that there are multiple scenarios in day-to-day life where something doesn't line up exactly with how reality is. But because we're social creatures and we understand that there's nuance, not everything is black and white, we give certain leverages or leniencies towards it. So it's not super out there to be like, hey, you know what? It's okay to call someone Pixie, even though that's not their governmental legal name. And it's okay to say hey, I'm going to call her Stephanie because she likes that name more,
Yeah, until this is applied in reality like you're talking about. So I can call you Pixie, for instance, but if you were to go in and have tests done on you by the government, for instance, can you identify yourself as Pixie?
What do you mean?
Or can you write Pixie and then your last name, or do you have to write your first and last name issued to you by the government? Do you have to check if you're male and female?
Yeah, I'm not.
Right?
I'm not disagreeing with that.
Yeah,
When did that ever come
so
to
my question
disagreement?
becomes, when it comes to use, I don't even understand what your point is.
Well, because there's a difference between institutional uses and interpersonal uses and political uses. This is obvious, right? So a big problem that happens in all these discussions is we talk about macro, which is ideology. So you would say, I disagree. You probably think trans ideology is super harmful. You disagree with all that. I'm assuming. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's true.
This is an ideological perspective. And then you go, well, Kyla, you have this ideological perspective. Interpersonally, though, would you respect somebody who you don't think is passing? It's yeah, of course. Just like when your wife asks, if something makes her look too fat, you're I'm going to be really cautious in the way that I talk about this. Or if your wife asks, do you think I'm still, not your wife specifically, obviously. I'm not making a personal attack. But if somebody's wife is do I still look beautiful? And she's she doesn't look like she did in her 20s, you kind of lie a little bit. Interpersonally, you do a lot of things that are polite, but obviously at an institutional level, these are also different, right? Acting like all these things must be treated equally is a dishonest way in the way that words are used, because words are deeply generative and dynamic.
Unfortunately, when we get into things like legislation, how we govern the world, how people actually deal with these things in real time, there's a huge amount of resentment which is built up over the fact that we're expected to lie about things we know aren't true.
Just one sec.
If T women are women, why do they all get offended when being treated by men like a women? Why are a large portion somehow lesbian? If I call a trans woman sweetheart, they rage. Fact of life.
It's ma'am.
Which actually, this brings up a great point, which is if it just comes down to identification, it can't, because this would create all kinds of issues. Like, for instance, if you were sleeping with someone and they identified as the opposite sex, while you were sleeping with them and really meant it, would that make you a homosexual? That doesn't, that kind of stuff makes no sense on its face. The self-ID claims are absurd.
I'm not using self-ID.
Okay, but you kind of are.
We're definitely and definitionally not, and this is why so many trans people hate.
So let's
just to be
let's
clear,
find out.
I am not using self-ID.
If it's not self-ID, right? Then how would you know to identify them as that? You're saying in the cases where you can't tell.
You pretty much always can tell unless somebody is rejecting the binary in and of itself. So a non-binary, for example, I'm going to get in a lot of water. I don't think most non-binary people are trans. I reject that. I don't think they are because I don't think self-D is valid. Most non-binary people, you'll go look at them and you're some of them you can tell. And some of them, let's be honest, everyone's had this super kind of bull lesbian come in with a short haircut, super stout, and been is that a man? Is that a trans man? And it's not. It's just a woman, because most of the ways that we evaluate each other is on the performance. So if they're attempting to pass, if their performance is an attemptive, I more or less know what they're going for. Interpersonally, I would respect that.
Try to each make your final points on this if you can. Hold on.
Andy in my AMJ donated $200. Fantastic debate. Thankfully, we all agree Nala is a woman and she's fantastic. Would one of the females make the hangry lesbian a bowl of ramen and keep it moving? Thursday night football is on.
Actually, we can linger on this topic a little longer, but I don't think we got to your relationship status, and you didn't answer the what is a woman question. So very quickly, what is your current relationship status?
I'm single, but I'm looking.
So,
did you answer the relationship status thing? Longest relationship?
3.5 years.
How long have you been single?
About 3 months.
Three months. Okay.
I was single when I came on last time, and I'm single now. So.
I see. Okay, gotcha. And then, what is a woman?
An adult female. I learned last time.
Adult human female?
Adult human female.
I see. Okay. If you guys want to continue, feel free.
So anyway, the ultimate point here is this.
Sure.
If I say woman and I mean adult female, right? And from the Christian perspective, and most religious perspectives, in fact, at least Abrahamic religion, are going to agree with this, right? They're going to say, nope, you're not this thing that you're not. We're not going to call you that. Obviously, it does us harm if we're compelled to do that, right? That is causing us harm, whether you like it or not. So why should we, A, be compelled to do that?
I'm not saying you should.
Okay, I'm not saying that you are. And B, why is it that even if we were compelled, we shouldn't resist by not doing it on purpose at that point, just to kind of make a political statement and a social statement of like, nope, we're not going to conform to you kind of beating down our religious values here. And when it comes to your purposes, when you're talking about the T question, you're still kind of making the statement that I'm not sure, they can kind of be, they can kind of not be. So I'd like you to clarify that for me.
Sure. So first of all, I've never argued for compelled speech. I ever think it's a violation of First Rights Amendments, I guess in America is what it's called. I don't believe in compelled speech. I think at the end of the day, you also have consequences for your free speech. So if you choose to call somebody who is clearly trying to perform in every single way as a woman, a man, they're probably going to think you're an asshole, and probably like 80% of the population.
What if you
will
called
too.
them male? Would that be...
It would be really weird interpersonally to like go up to somebody and be like, hello, male, or like in any way. Like most people would again cringe because the way they know what you're doing. They know that you're aesthetically trying to appeal to a political movement. So you're allowed to have any political field. You're allowed to be an asshole to people. You're allowed to politically, in kind of rejection, not use people's pronouns. I actually don't believe that this is required at all. The issue is people are also allowed to be like, hey, you're trying to be an asshole.
That way, just a 10.
Yeah.
So then where do we go then when we're inside of society and you have a Christian-owned business who says, no, we're not going to give you or make suitable accommodations for your bathroom arrangements, whereas instead you can use this bathroom or this bathroom like everybody else has always done.
Yep.
Right?
I love capitalism.
Yeah,
I hope your business suffers as a result, and if it doesn't, that's great.
So
but I think
nothing compelled there.
No, I'm not really big on compelled stuff.
Okay, so
Yeah, I think
If I could-
so this is just a semantic distinction then.
I would say almost wholly it is, excluding things like medical care, right? This is why I'm not pro self-ID.
Go ahead.
Can I just throw something in there? If you travel to any other country, and this is like my vote for the U.S. doing this, I think it would solve a lot of issues, but a lot of people would agree with me. Go to other countries, bathrooms are universal, and the sink is where everyone uses it.
I love European bathrooms.
Solves all problems.
I agree with you.
The fact that we have to worry about men and women's bathrooms, make it universal. Sink is in the front where everyone.
Well, you know something
Solve a
I've
lot of
seen.
problems. Don't have
I've
to worry
seen
about
that I object to as a man. Oftentimes, when there used to be a woman's bathroom and a man's bathroom, what they end up doing is they'll switch the man's bathroom to an all-gender bathroom, but keep the woman's bathroom a woman's bathroom. So y'all are encroaching on the male bathrooms, the men bathroom. I'm very upset.
Y'all
I'm
pee fast, though.
I'm
You're in and
upset
out.
about it.
Yeah, you guys never have bathroom lines.
Just to be clear, any inconsistent application of things, I'll just side with you. Yeah, we shouldn't do those things, obviously. It's basically benevolent sexism. It's kind of weird. It's like,
So when you get into the medical arena here,
Sure.
let's dive into this.
Okay.
So you're saying definitely and in society you don't care, right? Doesn't matter if my viewpoint is this way, you're not going to try to make anything which compels me to do anything opposite of that. You don't believe probably I should be deplatformed, for instance, about speaking out against stuff like that? Probably not.
But if
Okay.
you incite hate speech or violence against them,
Yeah,
that's
I
different.
get it.
yes.
I think that's a
Yeah, yeah.
distinction. But moving into this, on the medical field, what are the things you want to see there? What are the things you're wanting to see there, Kyla?
Yeah. So the things that I would like to see are, for example, no self-ID and a pretty rigorous process by which we like determine these things. I think I haven't got into any of the neuroscience stuff when it comes to definitions because it's really important to understand how definitions function. But AI has done like crazy stuff for leaping us forward in, as far as neuroscience. I believe you're born trans. I don't believe that this is like a choice or anything like that. And I think if you're choosing to be it, you're doing it for political reasons, popularity reasons, or something, probably mental illness specifically related, right? It seems to be the case that...
Okay, can we back up just briefly so
Yep.
we don't move into
Yep,
too
you're
many
good.
things? You say that you think people are born trans.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm
Why?
so questioning that.
I would say we have really strong literature showing like the historicity of some sort of trans issues going back hundreds of years. There's absolutely been these things. This is part of where autogynephilia
That's not
came
good
out of.
evidence for you being born trans, though.
Another
could
thing
have
would be things
environmental
like
factors.
heritability, right? So I think there's a high level of like genetic comorbid factors that are associated with being trans. There seems to be some level of predictability with estrogen levels. Is it born as far as like epigenetic versus just genetic? It's probably more in the epigenetic direction. another really big marker that it's probably born in.
So you're talking about environmental factors impacting this in a great way as well?
No, epigenetic factors is not environmental factors
No,
alone.
that's not what I asked. I asked if you're talking about environmental factors affecting this as well, or if you think it's mostly just a genetic thing.
I mean, anything mental health is going to be complicated. Probably both of these things are playing in, but probably when it comes to trans, more you need to have like a genetic. It's like a pre-requirement, maybe is the best way to say it.
Yeah. Well,
You're
I'm not talking
pre-required to
about,
have the genes.
So
for it.
let me clarify. So I'm not talking about the alcoholic who they have a predisposition towards alcohol, but absent the alcohol, they never become an alcoholic. What I'm asking for here is if you think that particular circumstance of the movement towards the thing is the genetic disposition, or if there's a different genetic disposition where they're actually born with this disposition to want to move into another body or whatever the mental illness is.
Based on the earliness of where dysphoria seems to emerge, I suspect that it's going to be like probably still epigenetic to some degree, but I'm going to be clear, the literature is still out on this one, on, just to be clear, every single thing to do with the brain. So it's a really hard question to answer.
You mean like the trans brain scans and all that?
Yeah, sure. The trans brain scans where it's like, are they the same as women's brains? And it's like some research said yeah, some said no. Right? This is a really unsolved problem, but it does seem highly genetic. Starting at 3, any sort of like mental thing that begins that early is very suspicious for high levels of genetic involvement.
So then how come when you see this movement, then in other cultures, you see it in distinctly different ways? If you're pre-programmed, for instance, in the West, to be a male who's born and wants to be a woman, wants to be a female, why is it that you respond in a distinctly different way than you would in a different culture? In other words, why is it that if you're born Scottish, you don't want to get in a kilt? Right? This is the question.
Why do you think that the kilt is in any ways comparable to like gender identity?
Because of presentation, which is what you said is the mark of gender. An ID is presentation. So why is it that they always want to present like a Western filled up girl who looks like kind of a skank on Instagram versus what a woman would look like in Saudi Arabia?
Wait, so do you think trans people just don't exist outside of Western countries?
That's
is
not
that
what I
He's
asked.
saying that it's like an aesthetic that they put on. Are you telling me that you honestly believe that wearing a kilt is similar to becoming trans? Do you
Well,
think that
what
they're
I'm
the
saying
same?
is that...
Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that if it's aesthetics that we're looking at, and that's what you claim gender actually is an aesthetic presentation towards a thing...
I didn't say transgenderism ideology is that thing. I said the way that I define gender is performance. These are not the same
but
thing.
Performance is what? Isn't that the aesthetic?
Well, no. The performance is in large part aesthetic, but you're now asking me about ideology.
That's what I'm asking you.
What
is
is
like,
ideology?
How do you know that the way that these are presented, right, in the West, if you were put in a different environment, in a different country...
Would they become fa-fa-fini like the Samoans?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a valid question, but it's not similar to a kilt. And I don't think that these things are analogous in any way. And we can't pretend like they are. The actual thing about fa-fa-fine shows, probably the way that they express societally is pretty open up to society. But the fa-fa-fine are a third gender.
Yeah,
That's
so
how
that
their
ought to
society
put...
reconciled
Well,
it.
so I mean, just that alone, just that statement, that the environment's going to greatly impact whether or not you even present with the opposition of gender?
That's not what I've said.
Okay, well then why don't you rephrase it?
Okay, let's go back. What is ideology?
Well, who cares? Go back to my question.
What is ideology?
No, wait. Hang on. You're moving back too far.
No.
The previous statement that you just made was what?
The previous statement that I said was that the fa-fa-fine express socially in a different way than the way that
before that
transgender
you
people
said
do.
that depending on where you're at in the world, right, you may not even present with this type of gender.
That is not what I said.
It is what you
I said that they present as a third gender, but the dysphoria rates are very similar. When you rate them on things like dysphoria of body, it rates very similar to Western trans women and trans men. They're
in this
absolutely
one
similar
culture.
groups. In the one culture.
Yeah, in this one culture, but that.
Wait,
but
why
this
would you
moves,
dismiss
but
this
this
over
moves
one
back.
culture?
But this moves back to the question of like, how do you know that if they're born?
Great. That's a good question.
Yes.
What's ideology?
Okay, not so erudite. You're being completely obtuse.
I'm not being obtuse.
You are being obtuse. Go ahead and explain it. Explain it so that you feel better
Let me explain why
about
I'm
yourself.
asking you this, just to be
Go ahead.
nice. The
Go
reason
ahead.
I'm asking you this is because you moved from talking about gender and performance, which is a definitional argument, to then conflating it with an ideological argument.
Okay.
These are not the same
Explain
topics
it so
to
you
talk
feel
about.
better, and then we can move on.
I'm not going to explain it until I feel better. I'm going to explain it until we're on the same page
Okay.
because we can't have a good conversation if you're shifting between
Then
the
stop
lenses of how
talking
we're
and explain
analyzing
it.
things. Okay, so what is the difference between a performance and an ideology?
Don't ask me questions. Explain it.
I'm asking you that
Don't ask me
question.
questions. Explain it.
I don't want to explain it. I want
You
to
don't
make
want to
sure we're on
explain
the
it. You
same
just
page.
want to ask
Well,
you
you're
said I
smart,
need to
Andrew.
explain this concept to you so that you understand it. I say explain
I
it.
think
You
you're
ask me
smart.
questions.
I think you're smart.
Just
hold on. I've
explain it.
explained it 3 times.
Oh, explain it again.
You're very smart.
Explain it
I don't
again.
think you're participating in the conversation
I'm
well.
literally asking you to explain it to me.
Okay, etiology is how something comes about. That's when you were asking me about things
Okay.
like epigenetics and nature versus
Okay.
nurture questions. The other thing, presentation performance, is a semantic definitional conversation. We can have both of these, but when you act like they're the same conversation, it's just muddy.
So how do they get...
Modest Hikima donated $200. How many genders are there? Do we need list of 5 on our legal forms?
Oh,
5
5 quadrillions.
That's crazy.
It got, yeah, okay.
TTS did you dirty.
TTS did you dirty. Does anybody know what that number is, by the way? Anyone care to wager?
Trillion, maybe?
There could be infinity.
More than that.
Gazillion.
There could be as many as you
50,
want. They're socially
50
constructed. You just make them up.
Trillion.
I disagree with that because I don't believe in
Billions.
light years. As long as you don't believe in self-ID, these things are concretable and you can manage them. I don't believe in self-ID. I don't think there's cat gender. I don't think that there's like things like zers. I think non-binaryism is usually people between transition of becoming trans, or it's a political statement, typically. I think that, for example, cat gender, it's just dumb. I'm not really interested in it at all.
What
It
about
doesn't map onto
dragonkin?
anything.
What is that?
Dragonkin? Do you have any thoughts on
I mean,
dragonkin?
dragons are so cool, right? No, of course not.
Okay.
Yeah, in a serious way, no, of course
Okay,
not.
okay.
Yeah, so when you're
curious.
when you're moving
Just
back
curious.
into gender,
Sure.
okay, when you're talking about
Definitions?
no, not the definition,
Or the etiology.
but yeah, now we're talking about the etiology.
Great.
So if we're going to move into this, how it comes to be, okay, would you say that the same person, we took the same genetics and they were born in, like, I don't know, Zimbabwe, right? That there's a good distinct possibility that just due to the environment, they may never actually present in this way at all.
I think that there's a decent chance in like Zimbabwe. I think Zimbabwe is highly conservative and maybe Islamic. I could be wrong. They're probably not going to present in any way because they'd probably get killed, and they're probably going to have high levels of mental health conditions.
Yeah,
as a
but you
result.
don't know that that wouldn't be the reason. I'm saying that if they weren't going to, instantly destroy them, you think that they would come out trying to present as a Western woman, or would they try to present as a female in their
in
culture?
Zimbabwe, why would they ever come out as presenting like a
Well,
Western woman in
so
Zimbabwe?
this is the question moving backwards
Can I
that
ask
I
you
already
another
asked
question?
you before, which is, if they're coming out, why is it that they only want to present in the way that they see the Western cultural
Because
women
society
present?
determines the way that we express mental health all the time. For example, have you ever heard of, I forget the term of it, it was a disease that went across Japan where men believed genuinely that their dicks were being swallowed by their body. Have you heard of this mental health
Sounds like a
condition?
good time. Did you want to come in, by the way?
Someone
It sounded
Google
like you
that
wanted
one.
to come in.
Someone Google that one.
I feel like it's just kind of a odd question because it's like it's the same thing with like being gay. Like before, how many artists spent every day with someone of the same gender and then goes down in history as their best friend? Obviously, didn't come out as gay because the culture they lived in didn't really accept it as much.
Let's stick. Go ahead.
Yeah, so if somebody has a mental health condition or something that is predilecting them towards a direction, their society is going to have implication in how that looks and expresses. This is why transgender people with very similar markers to Western transgender people are fa'afafine in the Samoan culture. In the Zimbabwe culture, they're probably really depressed men and women, is my guess, right? With high suicide rates at about, high, bad word.
Deletion.
Deletion. Yeah. Andrew, before you respond, 2 more minutes on this. We can come back to it later. I'd like to take a little interlude so we can maybe ask some other questions, but we can certainly come back to it. But
Sure.
if you guys each want to make like a
So,
1 minute.
I'll finish by saying this. Schizophrenia is a very established, highly genetic mental health condition. It is epigenetic in nature. It typically gets triggered around 21, and you must have a genetic marker for it, or you'll never have it. And you have to have like 2 to 3 like major episodes of depression. The issue is that the way schizophrenia presents in Western North America isn't the same. Hallucinations are often very different. The way that they manage the society is very different. The way that schizophrenia emerges across societies is varied by the society that they live in, even though schizophrenia itself is a legitimate condition.
Okay, and I'll finish with this. This has not manifested itself in society spontaneously and by any metric at all. It's been a political activism by LGBTQ groups who are trying to push this forward, who fund the studies into these, they fund the sociological studies. I mean, almost all of them. They're funded by LGBTQ groups themselves who give these grants to colleges, they give them to schools, they give them to all sorts of different people to do these studies.
Yeah.
And so what we end up with is results we can't even trust inside of a field where the replication is so bad that in some cases it can only be replicated up to 29%. So I have a hard time believing that's considering this is only something that even in my own lifetime has come to the forefront, that this is not agenda-based or that people actually have any concerns whatsoever outside of this now political phenomenon as to what a woman or man ever was. I don't think that they ever cared. We never did. You never did. Nobody ever did.
The issue is it can always be both. That's the problem. It's not like autism spontaneously emerged in the 40s when we made the diagnosis. It always existed. We just didn't have a categorical name for it. These are not the same things. Is there an agenda going on? Are people really trying to push it? Yes. Is it weird that LGBTQ communities are funding it? No. Most alcoholism groups fund studies for alcohol. Most depression studies are funded by some sort of really thing. But there is a bias that exists. The literature on specifically transgenderism is the worst because there's actually two biased groups. There's the very pro LGBTQ that is super sussy with their stats, and then there's the very anti LGBTQ that is also sussy with their stats, and it is a nightmare trying to manage it. There's a couple of groups that are in between that are doing a fantastic job, but most of their data is coming out in 2024.
I haven't seen very many of those. I haven't seen very many of those anti-LGBTQ groups inside of sociology. That's for sure, especially in comparison to the other groups which are pro-LGBTQ. But that aside, letting that be, inside of society again, you see as our mental health professionals have increased inside of society, you have seen a huge amount of mental health also increase, especially among women. Women enter into those fields, suddenly they're giving descriptors for mental health crises for women all over the place. Everybody's on some kind of antidepressant, some type of pill. They're on some kind of something that they've been diagnosed with. So it's possible that pharmaceutical companies also take advantage of this. I would assume that they do. I would also assume that inside of the psychological fields, which so many women want to get into, that seems to have, there's something that they're drawn to, that they're attracted to, but you can also see the amount of mental illness of women in society is through the roof. So I almost wondering if women are chasing their own tail.